Hello. All right, I am doing a little demonstration here of using a ticketing system to map out a workflow and using StackStorm to automate it. Up here is, I'm going to kind of jump right in. This is a Jira instance, and this is an instance of Jira, a free account. I've created what's called an epic, which is kind of like to expand a cluster. And in this, I've created 7 issues within the epic, which are each one is going to represent a server. Now, down below, I just kicked this off just before the recording, is a log file that's working through these tickets. The first thing that they do is they request a host name. And if I refresh this, these tickets, each one of these have gotten a new host name, and they're up to IPM requested. And I'm going to show them on the board real quick, and then I'm going to go and actually explain the workflow part and before I start explaining that. This is a high-level view, the assignment phase. And in assignment are things like request, host name, location, IP address, and DNS. There's a ready to rack, ready for iDRAC, validate, and then the OS phase. And those are 3 stages, and it gives you a high-level overview of where each server is. And then each of these little things is in Jira what's called an epic, but essentially represents a cluster expansion process. So that's the kind of the Kanban board, and then I have another Kanban board which is detailed level for each individual server, and these servers are moving across, and they'll all actually all stop here at the DCL install, because I put a special a flag in there that part is manual. Once these all get in there, and I think they're all going to hit there now. So while they're stopped there, I'm going to go ahead and show the what Jira workflow is. And the reason I'm using Jira here is because the tool that we may end up using, that we're looking to use, ServiceNow, doesn't really allow end users to develop it, to develop workflows. You need a team of engineers or developers, ServiceNow developers, and you need meetings and design requirements and stuff. With Jira, it's really made, it's developer friendly, and it's developer friendly, and it's also PM friendly. So, oops, that's not the one I want. So I apologize for that. Expansion build out is the one I want. It allows, in places I've worked, usually the project manager manages the workflow for the projects they're responsible for, and which to me makes a lot of sense. And they make it really easy to do so. So this is the workflow for an expansion build out. We open, and this is specifically for the servers. I did not create any real customizations around the cluster build, but we go from open to hostname requested, location, IPM, DNS, DCL, iDRAC, and so on and so forth until notify platform done. And I have a status called troubleshooting, which is any of these steps fail, we can move it into troubleshooting, and it will sit there until someone like me does the troubleshooting, or maybe we create a ticket off of that for somebody else. And then once we're done with troubleshooting, we have the ability to move it into any location. So if we have trouble getting the IP addresses, we might manually go out, get the IPs, do the DNS, and move it to ready to say that it's now ready to rack, and have the data center do their install. As an example, we might, if we're doing troubleshooting, we might skip some steps and move it down. And actually, I want to show this workflow. So here, issues. I want to show a little bit more with the workflow that you have capability. And the idea here is not so much that, like I said, we probably will not be doing Jira unless the other plan falls through. And I was looking at some other tools like Process Maker that have a lot more customization you can do around workflows. But with this Jira, it's a widely used product. There's a lot of community support and enterprise support, and it actually would be cheaper. It's about 20,000 for a data center enterprise license for up to 500 users, and that's for a year. So it's not that expensive compared to what you might otherwise do. And they do have lots of training for project managers and stuff. Uh, I've always used Jira as a user prior to this, so it actually took me a week or so to figure out how to create this workflow the way I wanted it. Because you actually have to make the workflow when it's not associated with the project, and then associate it with the project at the end. Now, this I want to show um, this transition. So there's statuses, and then moving from one status to the other is a transition. And with each transition, you can do things like you can validate it. So I've only set up one at hostname. Hostname requested, and I created a custom field within the ticket for the hostname to live in. And if the hostname is not provided, it'll show no hostname. And then there's also triggers you can do for automatic transitions. So, for instance, I could have gone the other way. As soon as you enter the hostname, it can automatically transition it to the next step. And then there's things called post functions. So after I did set this up. So you create the host name, and then the field summary will take that value. So when we create these tickets, we just put a placeholder in the summary. But once the host name is there, then the summary field becomes the same as host name. And then we can also, everything fires a generic event. We could actually watch that message bus for those events. What I'm currently doing is polling every 30 seconds. I pull Jira from Stackstorm, which is a lot like you logging in and hitting refresh on your browser. But we could actually have Stackstorm, or I'm sorry, we have Jira either make calls out, webhooks out to a specific system, or they fire events out on the bus, and then something can just be watching for those events to occur, which is much less resource intensive than polling. Uh, so that's kind of the idea of a workflow. You have your workflow is a diagram that you draw out, and then you can make specific. You can for transitions between statuses, you can put validation and stuff that happens during the transition. Like here, I changed some of the fields, and there's a lot more you can do that I haven't touched. But that's the kind of the basic idea. So if we go, there's also custom fields. I put some stuff in here that normally would go into like like a tool like Nlight or Device42 for rack location, or the data center name and data center, and some things like that. And the IP addresses, usually you probably would not put them in the ticket itself, but I did that for the purpose of demonstration. I'm not going to say it's super easy to do. You do have to spend some time researching it and learning it. So this is showing all the ones within this build here, and I'm going to bring up a ticket. And along the way, it's gathered a management IP, an IDRAC IP, and I'm going to bring this ticket up to a more detailed view. So here's all the comments this ticket picked up. 9 minutes ago, it generated a random host name, which it put here. And then when it did that transition, Jira updated the summary to do the host name. I have some network fields here. And then Stackstorm called it Nlight for position in data center PC1 and room PC1 room 2 and came up with a rack blah blah blah. So that's the rack name that it's going to go in the U position. And we could put these in fields, but ideally it would just be Nlight updating that, and then there's just a comment describing it. But maybe for things like networking, we need to know the rack and stuff, so because that's going to tell them what switch they're in, what switch they're going to be connecting it to. So that could become a specific field for the next step. And then we generated random IPs, and I didn't put them in the comment. I put them up here in these fields. And then here it says created DNS, and there's the hostname.usexample.net for management, and here's the iDRAC DNS record. And currently, it's in the status of DCL install. If I so when the data center guys go in and they rack this server, they probably won't use our tool, but they might upload a document into the DCL tool, which updates Nlight, which updates ServiceNow, and marks it as racked. In our case, we're just pretending they're coming in here and clicking that they racked it, and it's now ready for iDRAC. Now, down here at Stackstorm, every 30 seconds, I'm polling Jira for updated issues, and I'm comparing when it was last updated in Jira to when we last saw it updated. And if it hasn't changed in Jira from when we last looked at it, it won't act upon it. That ticket has now changed, and CAP 8 will trigger a process device, which will move that ticket through the workflow, and then within 30 seconds or so, this one should have a new status and new comments here. There it says somebody has configured the iDRAC and is ready for validation, and it moves through. So this one server has started moving. The rest are stuck. They haven't been racked yet. I can go to this Epic link and I can view all the servers in this link, which in our case is a cluster, and each server in there. And I created 7 servers. When I was originally going to do the demo, I was planning to use this node count and automatically create 8 tickets. I figured it'd be better just to kind of show you can create a ticket with, you can put whatever in there. It doesn't matter because it's going to get overwritten. If you have the host name, you could actually put this in here. So I could say, I know the host as the host name, and then you can create it. If you know the IP addresses, you can actually put them in there and it will not overwrite them. And I'm gonna, right now it's open, so it's almost like a draft, and the Jira is not going to see it. It's not going to know how to handle it. And this is CAP 15. It will trigger a process device. Now I'm going to go over to Stackstorm a little bit while that's sitting there. So Stackstorm is the event-driven automation tool, and this is the history. And here is a ton of process devices that have occurred today since I started this recording. And so for CAP 15, it's in an open status. It doesn't actually know how to do anything with that. It just fetched it, and it didn't know what to do yet. With each one, it fetches it, it looks at the current status, and decides what to do. Now, Stackstorm has its own workflow concept, which is more of how it handles the workflow. And this is written in basic YAML, or the actual workflow. And here I look up the status name. I look at the host name requested. I don't have anything for open. And for troubleshooting, all I do is put a message saying that it's in troubleshooting and will not touch. And when it's done, I put all done, nothing to do. And over here, there's a status DCL installed. Now, when I wrote the demo, I made it automatically move that through. But for the video, I decided to, I kind of brained it. Now, in Jira, DCL install is the actual service name. And I just put manual so that it won't match. It never gets down there and does that. So kind of like commenting it out, but in a way. But essentially, so here's what happens. There's a sensor, monitor issues, which runs a script called monitor issues, and it checks for a couple things. It checks for a flag in the database called auto issue, which means it'll actually process it. And then it pulls every 30 seconds. And then when it pulls, and there's also, it defines a trigger called update server issue. Monitor issues.py. This is code, so I'm not going to do too much, so you get your eyes down. But essentially, I set up a query in Jira, and in a real-world situation, this would actually, a lot of this would come from a configuration file. But I set up a query for anything that is not in troubleshooting and it's not notified platform done. So it did pick up the open status ticket, but it sent it, and then I look in StackStorm's data store for a key called auto issue, and if that auto issue is set to false, that will actually not even hit Jira. It won't even query it. So if you wanted to turn it off for the holidays, that'd be a way to do it. We could actually still query Jira or our ticket system, but maybe have a field in the ticket itself specific, but we'd have something like, unless it's, right now it's in backlog, we could say if it's in the backlog, don't do it, but don't do anything with these. But if it's in process, or if there's we could say if it's in a hold status, we don't do anything. We don't have to quite set it in there, but we can look for a reason whether or not we're going to actually process these automatically or not. And this one is probably done. Yeah, notify platform done. That server's done. These 6 are still waiting, and this one hasn't even started the process. All right, so we're polling, and if we do the poll, then it'll run that query, and we'll compare the updated timestamp, which is here 4 minutes ago, to when we last updated in the data locally, when we last looked at it. And if it's different, and I'm not even saying newer, but if somebody changed this time to be 10 minutes ago, that's now different, then it will go ahead and it'll kick off a trigger called detect demo update server with the ticket ID as a key. And then that process device, so that trigger goes out there, and it doesn't do anything by itself. So you need a rule. The rule we made is called handle update. That's an old name from an example service issue. It should be server. And this looks for the trigger of type update server issue, and it calls the action process device, which is this workflow I showed when we first went down here. So if we go into StackStorm, unfortunately these pages don't auto refresh, so when you get to them they might be a little bit stale. Jira's the same way, but I won't get into it. But you can see every time a trigger, all the instances of that trigger going out, and then the rule that enforces it. You can see every enforcement of a rule, and it gives you an execution ID and stuff, which is important if you're troubleshooting. You can actually pull up the details of that execution ID, and this one, each one of these workflows, you can see the actual action it takes. And basically, it's not like one long process that It keeps running until the entire ticket is completed. All this, this action, the goal is to move it forward one step. You look at the current state, and you figure out what, and you know what the next step is. You know if you can take that next step or not, and if you can, you attempt it and move it forward, and then you stop running, and then eventually, by pulling or a trigger or something, will cause you to look at the ticket again and see if you can move it forward anymore. Let me show this one. So I'm going to move this one, which I've set the host name to request host name, even though we've already got it. So cap 15, we will see, I'm going to start moving some of these forward here. Rack ready for rack. And there's some bulk actions you can take and stuff, but it's just as easy to click these here. And if I automated everything on this page, there we see a bunch of these saying that will trigger device, and cap 15 will. So that's this guy. And if I refresh the page here, remember I set this by hand, saying I know the host. So it set updated the summary. It didn't actually create a comment. You can see activity. Here's when I created it. I changed the host name, and Stackstorm changed the status. History is like activity, but a little bit more detailed. So Stackstorm made the changes from host name to location requested. I made this change here. Work log is for if you're logging time, like an hour, you spend an hour on it. Not too important here. Oh, you can see it's already updated. It's contacted Nlight. You can view a ticket within the workflow. So this is where we're at currently. And then from any specific one, you can go and view it on the board. And like I said, I have the high level view. And then the detailed view. So this one's in assignment phase, this one's in DCL, these two are in DCL and these are in the OS phase, and this one is done. You can watch all the tickets as they move through, all the servers as they move through. And if we need to create switches and manage those, or cables, or something like that, they might have a slightly different workflow than the servers would, like they wouldn't have OS installation. Yeah, so that's, I've sent my maximum emails for this free account. And these two, I'm going to go to the detailed view. I believe they're in, I can also move these as racked, and then next time that pull, it'll pick those up and move them through. So that's kind of the basics of the workflow. The idea is that you'll want something where you can track it at a high level view and then see the individuals. You may, now I didn't do anything specifically for the cluster build view. These are here. These are some different ones I've laid out. I could do some things like once all the servers are in the done state, we can move it over. One of the ideas was wait till the cluster is in progress before moving the devices. Things like that. And then, if you click on one of these, you can customize. It's going to bring up a detail. It's running a bit slow, but you can. That is really slow. I don't know why. I should have showed up by now. No, I'm not going to. But, I mean, if you, well, Oh, there it finally came up. You can actually put some things to list the individual servers there. I like the high level Kanban board. Just kind of tells me what phase it's in. And these here, I see all these are in a state where they're processing the device. Like next time we do this, they'll probably, they're not quite done yet, but they'll get there. And if something seems to be hung up, you can do things like you can create reports. I don't have any reports specifically, but you could create a report or an alert that tells you if something stays in a state for too long. I think that'd be something important in whatever system we go. Is if we're in, like we know, it might sit in ready to rack for a week or so, but it might be sitting in, if it's sitting in requesting host name or any of the assignment phases for more than 10 minutes, that might be a problem. If it's supposed to be within a minute or two, depending, we can do a report saying, oh, it's stuck here, and somebody can go in and look at it and move it to troubleshooting and so on. You got to figure, as you go along, you want to figure out how long it takes within a phase or within a state, and create reports around that or alerts around that. If it's taking too long, then that's something to you should be notified about. Yeah, boom. This cluster is now done, so we could actually go to, in theory, I could have the automation put it into, move the cluster build into like a review phase, essentially to kind of like a done, but have someone look it over. And here's the one we pre-named, and it created DNS records with that host name. And if I go to just a little quick step back to Stackstorm, if I look for the ones cap the cap 15 ones, configure iDRAC. Oh, see, this is probably when it was at VCL stage. Create DNS. I want to see the one where that's hardware validation. I want to see the one where it requested the host name. And in my thing here, I could see it already had a host name, transition to request location. That within the automation, you can look for things like, I've done some where I've already had the IPs, and in fact, sometimes when I was doing a lot of the testing, oops, device. I want to go to the detail server view. I was moving these back and forth, back and troubleshooting, and then into different states here. And so they're pulling for your updated server issues. Nothing's changed in a while, but well, everything was done. So this one's out of troubleshooting, and this one already has IP addresses, so it's not going to change those. It's not going to go out and request new IPs for it. And that's how the automation should work. It should see what's done and only have to update what hasn't, what needs to be updated. Whereas your workflow is your overview of where it is in the process. The workflow is your process, and you move it through, whether it's by hand, like such as whenever it gets to DCL install, or whether it's automation moving it through. So I think that pretty much covers the overview. If we end up not using ServiceNow, I would definitely recommend going with Jira, just because it's something we can roll out in. Well, there is a problem with Jira in that you do need a place to host it. You need a team to management. Hopefully, there is. Ideally, there'd be a group that we could pawn off managing the Jira instance to. For instance, we have a team that manages GitLab and Artifactory and things like that. Maybe they can manage a Jira instance for us. But if that's only if we end up having to use Jira. But if, on one, we don't want to be bogged down with managing this tool if we don't have to, which is why we're looking at ServiceNow. But if we do ServiceNow, we can use some of the work, we can do some of the ideas of what we want and work through that in something like Jira, and then translate it to ServiceNow specific terminology. Like these are epics and tasks, whereas there it'd be like requests and tasks and task items, things like that cascade down. That's just going to keep moving. Oh, and I have some things in here, like once it's moved into status, you can only move it according to the workflow or troubleshooting. The workflow has limits. You can't jump from location to OS install, or you can't skip steps unless you go to troubleshooting, and then specific people would have access to do that. But that's kind of the idea there. All right, yeah, that's the overview, and then we can go into more detail down the road.